Okay, hello again, everyone, and thank you very much for joining Dragon Trail International and ForwardKeys for today's joint webinar. Today, we're going to be sharing with you the latest data on Chinese flight bookings, as well as the newest Chinese sentiment data on travel. We hope that this webinar will offer you a valuable snapshot of the current situation and mood in China regarding travel right now, with a few surprises along the way, and help you to identify future possibilities for marketing and product development. My name is Sienna Perulis-Cook, and I'm Director of Marketing and Communications at Dragon Trail International, based in the UK. Joining me from Xiamen is Insights Expert at ForwardKeys, Nancy Dai.
Hello, everyone.
So just to run you through the format for today's webinar, we are going to start with a very quick overview of what is going on in China now in terms of the COVID situation and current travel restrictions. We'll then turn over to Nancy to share the newest flight booking data for next week's May Labor Day holiday, as well as upcoming summer travel. She'll also provide some analysis of travel trends to Hainan and Macau and APAC as a whole, focusing particularly on demographic and geographic source markets to watch. I'll then give you a very first look at Dragon Trail's Spring 2022 Chinese Traveler Sentiment Survey, which includes information about overall travel sentiment, domestic travel, changing attitudes about quarantine policy, appraisals of outbound destinations, and much more. At the end of the webinar, we are happy to answer your questions. So please do send in questions that you have at any time during the webinar by using the Q&A button on your Zoom control panel. And Nancy and I will do our best to answer those questions at the end of the webinar. One more thing to note is that we are going to be sharing a lot of data and a lot of charts during today's webinar, but rest assured that we will be sending out today's presentation slides to everybody by tomorrow, if not later today, and we'll also be sending you a link to a recording of the webinar. So you'll have all of the information from today's presentation for your own reference, as well as to share with any colleagues who you think might be interested in the webinar but weren't able to attend the live session today. Before we get started, I'd like to give a very brief introduction to Dragon Trail International for any of you who might not know us. We are a marketing solutions company with expertise in the travel industry and in China, where the company is headquartered. We have offices in Beijing, Shanghai, and Xi'an, as well as international office in the UK. The services that we provide include B2B and B2C marketing, market research and strategy consulting, market representation services, digital and hybrid events. We're proud to work with leading travel brands all around the world, including destinations, hotels, airlines, attractions, and more. You can find lots more information about the clients we work with, case studies of our work, our services, and lots of free resources on Chinese tourism and digital marketing on our website, www.dragontrail.com, as well as our social media channels on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. So now let's spend just a minute or so to go over what's going on in China now in terms of COVID and travel restrictions in order to give you some background and context for the rest of the presentation. So as I'm sure most of you are aware, what was originally planned as a 4-day total lockdown in Shanghai is now in its 4th week in order to stop the spread of the Omicron variant. Shanghai is by no means the only city under full or partial lockdown either. This is not particularly encouraging for the travel sector looking forward to the May holiday, and Beijing residents, as well as residents of other cities now, have been told not to leave the city during the May holiday period. But Nancy will be able to say more about which areas of the country do show more promise for Labor Day travel. Although from the outside, it might seem that China's strict zero COVID policy is unchanging, it is in fact being continuously adjusted. So for example, the rules for when COVID patients can leave the hospital have been somewhat relaxed, and asymptomatic patients are now sent directly to isolation centers rather than being required to go into the hospital. There's some discussion about a shift to home isolation, but this has yet to happen. So these may seem like slow and minor changes, but they do show that adjustments are being considered and subsequently implemented. Perhaps most promising is the announcement a couple of weeks ago that 8 cities in China are trialing a new quarantine policy for those arriving from overseas, with hotel quarantine now cut down from 14 days to 10 days if the traveler tests negative for COVID. So just to reiterate some very old and consistent news, outbound group travel and package trips are still banned, as they have been since January 2020, and non-essential outbound travel is strongly discouraged. Moreover, the Chinese government is still not issuing new passports or passport renewals for non-essential travel. And even if it was, flights abroad continue to be extremely limited, extremely expensive, and at risk of being canceled. Despite all of this, China's domestic travel market has seen some fairly good times over the past 2 years, despite various outbreaks and local lockdowns. But let's turn over to Nancy now to hear what the situation is like now, looking forward to next week's National Public Holiday.
Thanks, Sienna. So let me share my screen. Sorry, Sienna, can you stop sharing?
I've just allowed you to share your screen. Sorry, I didn't do that earlier.
Yeah, can you see my screen now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. So hi everyone, I'm Nancy, an insights expert from ForwardKeys. Before I start, just a few words about who we are and what we do. We are a travel analytics company specializing in the air travel market. On the supply side, we know how many seats airlines schedule. On the demand side, we monitor the bookings made and tickets issued. All of this in near real time. For the past 11 years, we have been using big data to help governments and travel business across the world to understand current and future travel trends. To start with, I would like to share an overview of the current travel trend in Chinese domestic travel. Chinese domestic air travel market has been badly affected by the recent outbreak of COVID-19 across the country. While this is not the first time the market has been interrupted by the resurgence of COVID cases, this is the lowest it has fallen during the past 2 years. In 2021, the Chinese domestic travel market had already recovered to 82% of 2019's level. However, we can see from this graph that in 2022, after a slight uptick around early February for the Chinese New Year travel period, the trend continued declining. In the week of the 7th of April, domestic air travel was only recorded at 20% of the pre-pandemic level. Year to date, domestic travel is at 54% of 2019's level. Focusing on destinations year to date, we can see that leisure destinations are the most resilient. While Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen were more affected by the new wave of COVID, Chengdu and Chongqing in Southeast China climbed to the 2nd and 5th position in the top 10 destination list. with 81% and 70% of the recovery, respectively. Haikou and Sanya, both in Hainan, were also resilient, recovering 68% and 73%, respectively. As all the bookings issued until 21st of April, forward bookings for domestic travel in the upcoming Labor Day holiday are 94% behind the same period last year. However, if we look further into summer travel, the booking situation looks less pessimistic, as bookings are down 71%. We feel that travelers still feel confident about travel, and we have learned from previous experience that once the outbreak in China was controlled, there's an immediate increase in domestic travel demand. A key trend we have also noticed is that people tend to book last minute. Our data shows that the lead time for the flight bookings has shortened dramatically during the pandemic. Around 60% of bookings on Chinese domestic flights now are made under 4 days of departure. Airlines are also helping travelers to build this confidence. Followed by unlimited flight pass, some airlines, including Shenzhen Airlines and Hainan Airlines, have recently introduced a new product to make sure the flight you booked will not be cancelled within the 3 days of departure date. If the flight got cancelled, customers will get 100 RMB flight coupon for your next purchase. The current outlook of domestic travel may be depressing, but some valuable insights should put luxury brands and destinations at ease. Looking back to 2021, the big 3 hub airports, Shanghai Pudong, Beijing Capital, and Guangzhou Baiyun, remain the main gateways for international travel, accounting for 61% of total capacity compared to 51% in 2019. On the other hand, another interesting trend occurred. Non-hub airports increased 10% shares in 2021. And more revealing, the international traffic concentrated more on non-tier 1 cities. Xiamen increased its market share to 9%, jumped to the 4th position in 2021. Chengdu ranked in the 5th position with a 5% share. Chengdu and Xiamen win again with the latest government decision to shorten the quarantine period for international travelers. From 11th of April until 8th of May, as Sienna mentioned before, China has been starting a trial to reduce quarantine from 14 days to 10 days for international arrivals to 8 cities. The selected gateways are Shanghai, Guangzhou, Chengdu, Dalian, Suzhou, Ningbo, Qingdao, and Xiamen. Looking from the demand side for Chinese domestic travel at different tier levels, we have noticed that the traffic recovery from non-tier 1 airports has outperformed traditional busy hub airports in Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, which recovered to only 59% of the pre-pandemic level, while non-tier 1 cities have recovered 78% in total. Chengdu reached 82% and Chongqing 88% of 2019's level. We know that Hainan has seen consistent growth in popularity throughout the pandemic, fueled by special tax treatment on the sales of luxury goods. Let's now put a special focus on the booking patterns for travel to Hainan. One trend is that people tend to travel more in premium cabin classes these days. We can see that travelers flying in premium class is up by 2% in Q1 2022 compared to last year, while economy class bookings are down by 3%. If we break down the performance for its top source markets, Beijing and Shenzhen were the top markets for premium cabins. However, affluent travelers from Chengdu jumped to the third position with significant growth of 74%. Shanghai's performance was affected by the recent lockdown, but a general 4% growth in Q1 was thanks to an increase of 48% in January and February. When examining passenger profiles of travelers to Hainan in premium class in Q1, travel in family size has the largest share of 32%, followed by solo travelers, 26% share, and couple travelers, 23% share. Each of these categories increased its market share by 2 percentage points, while group travel shares decreased by 6 percentage points. Regarding outbound travel, as China has maintained strict border controls, Macau is the only destination seeing a rebound in booking for mainland Chinese travelers. Let's now take a closer look. We see that the share of passengers who book for travel in pairs in Q1 to Macau has increased 20 percentage shares when compared to the normal times. Air Macau's buy one, get one free plane ticket deal for mainland Chinese travelers has been extended for travel to June this year. So if you travel in two as a couple, you pay for one ticket and your companion gets a free ticket. The average room rates of 5-star during the Chinese New Year holiday period were around $150, decreasing by about 20% year over year. And you also get a discount for duty-free shopping when you stayed in certain hotels. All these offers just simply make the destination even more appealing to couples or honeymooners. Plus, couples traveling to Macau tend to stay longer. The share of passengers staying at Macau for 3 to 5 nights increased significantly by 30 percentage points when compared to 2019. Meanwhile, there was a drop of 34 percentage points in 1 and 2 night stays. Before the pandemic, Macau usually a combined holiday destination measured up a few days in Hong Kong, but now due to safety concerns and travel restrictions, travelers, especially romancing couples, tend to enjoy their time in just a single destination at a slower pace. While short-term prospects are still not optimistic for Chinese outbound travel, to give a greater sense of hope, let's finish with the positive news on the Asia-Pacific reopenings. This year, one by one, nations in Asia are reopening and scrapping challenging travel barriers such as quarantines and number of PCR tests, hinting at a possible travel restart in the region. Looking at some destinations in the region, issued air tickets are on the rise. Fiji and Maldives are performing the best, already outperforming 2019's levels in the first week of March. Island destinations may have the main advantage during this recovery phase, as people may feel safer traveling to less crowded places with a variety of outdoor activities. India recovered by 79%, Singapore 72%, Philippines 65%, and Australia 50%. Please note that bookings to India and Philippines are mainly VFR driven, however, while travel to Singapore has strong leisure pent-up demand components. To conclude, here are 4 key takeaways. First, the outlook for the Chinese domestic aviation market appears gloomy in the short term, but once the situation is contained, we believe travel demand will be back quickly. Second, our data shows that Tier 1 airports still represent more than half of international traffic, while Tier 2 increased their shares during the pandemic era. For domestic travel, travel from Tier 2 cities recovers faster than from Tier 1 cities. The latest government decision to shorten the quarantine period for international travelers is encouraging. As we can see from other destinations in the recovery mode, the authorities' willingness to shorten the quarantine period might be the first step to evaluate the whole reopening process. Third, Hainan is more popular for affluent travelers from Chengdu, while Macau is increasingly attractive to couples looking for longer stays. Finally, it's encouraging to see that travel to Asia Pacific has been accelerating into recovery mode, with destinations gradually reopening. And thanks for your time. You can contact me with any questions or visit our website to learn more about our destination gateway, our data solution made for the destination marketing professors keen to benchmark their destination performance. It now also includes flight search data to monitor intent as well as the demand. Thanks. Back to you, Sienna.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for that really interesting presentation. I'm now going to switch over to back to my slides. All right. And I am now very excited to share with all of you some of the findings from Dragon Trail's Spring 2022 Chinese Traveler Sentiment Report. So this is the first time that we are releasing any of this data to the public. So first, a little bit of background on the report. It is our 5th Chinese Traveler Sentiment Survey report that we have been doing twice a year since March of 2020. The survey includes responses from more than 1,000 mainland Chinese who have interest and experience in travel. Of those, 24% have experience with international travel. The sample size was controlled to be statistically representative in terms of age and gender, and all the respondents come from first-tier, new first-tier, and second-tier cities all around China. And the survey was conducted in March of this year. So let's start by discussing travel sentiment and comparing how this has changed in the last 6 months since our last sentiment survey in September. So first of all, the percentage of people saying that they won't travel now has increased considerably, up to 56%. When we conducted this survey in March, Omicron was already spreading quickly around China and with it lockdowns. At the same time, Russia had recently invaded Ukraine, and whatever people were seeing about this situation on the news or on social media in China, it was clear that war was breaking out in Europe. So all of this contributed to a much more cautious appraisal by travelers about travel. But despite this, we also see a fairly significant increase in those expressing eagerness for travel. Wary of the pandemic and pandemic-related restrictions, 1/3 of our survey respondents could not wait to start traveling again. Analyzing some of the things that came up most when speaking about sentiment towards travel, we can see growing attention to and frustration with the barriers to travel, such as testing, limited flights, and inconvenience. But when we look at sentiments associated with those who were eager to travel, we can also see a focus on nature, relaxation, time with family, and freedom as motivations to travel. When we asked survey respondents what would be needed for them to travel, consider traveling internationally, quarantine emerged as the biggest obstacle. Realistically, quarantine is really going to need to be relaxed for the recovery of Chinese outbound tourism to begin. The other most important factors in motivating people to travel overseas are destination friendliness, the smooth resumption of outbound travel, and affordability. So if quarantine is the biggest obstacle in people's minds to resuming outbound travel, what are Chinese attitudes like regarding the quarantine on arrival policy? Here, we can also see some quite major changes since our last sentiment survey in September of 2021. So back then, 36% of survey respondents actually wanted the quarantine on arrival policy to be stricter. Now, this proportion has reduced to 28%. At the same time, we see a growth in the proportion of those who would like to keep the quarantine policy the same. And we also see a growth in those who would like to see the quarantine policy relaxed. So of those that would like to see the quarantine policy relaxed, that now accounts for 39% of respondents. So we can only hope that with this kind of public opinion, the trial reduction that has started this month will be the start of a relaxation in the quarantine on arrival policy, though it is safe to assume that that is going to be a slow process rather than any kind of overnight change. So now let's talk about a few things that have stayed consistent in our surveys. The first is preferred travel type. When we compare September to March results, the exact same percentage, 81%, said that they preferred to travel as fully independent travelers. And large group tours are the least popular way to travel, both in September and in March. But at the same time, we can see that by March, there is increased popularity for small, private, customized, and local tours. Another thing that has remained really consistent throughout our surveys is preferred travel themes, with nature trips and island and beach travel topping the list in September as well as in March of this year and in previous surveys as well. Actually, the only thing that has really changed about this list of preferred travel themes compared to our survey in September is that we've seen an increase in interest in winter tourism. And this is very likely attributable to the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics that happened in February. You can find much more information about Chinese winter sports travel, including preferred outbound destinations for winter sports travel, in the full Spring 2022 Chinese Traveler Sentiment Survey, which will be available to you right after the webinar. So since the island province of Hainan has been such a hot Chinese tourism destination over the last couple of years, and it's something that Nancy focused on as well, I also wanted to touch on this topic. In our survey, we found that 40% of Chinese travelers have already visited Hainan, with an additional 32% either considering or planning a trip this year. While Hainan is incredibly important to the travel retail industry, and it's made news often for its duty-free shopping possibilities, we found that travelers are much more likely to go to Hainan to relax on the beach, try water sports, and spend time with loved ones, as opposed to going specifically for shopping. Now, that's not to say that those travelers that are more motivated by relaxing on the beach don't do some shopping while they're in Hainan, but it's important to recognize that for most travelers, shopping is not their primary motivation to visit Hainan. So for retailers thinking about how to increase revenue and drive more traffic to their shops, they'll need to think creatively about how to get some of those travelers off of their beach towels and into the shops. So now it's time to talk about outbound destinations in the eyes of Chinese consumers. And actually the news is really good. Over the last 6 months around the world, we've had surges of the Delta variant, then Omicron. We've seen almost everywhere outside of China start to relax or completely do away with their COVID prevention measures. So you might guess that this would make the outside world look more dangerous to Chinese travelers. However, that has not been the case at all. With the sole exception of Hong Kong, which was in the midst of a very serious COVID outbreak during the time that we were conducting the survey, every single destination on our list has shown an improvement in safety perceptions since September, with more travelers saying that the destination is safe, fewer travelers saying that the destination is unsafe, and more people choosing either safe or unsure for their appraisal of how safe it is to travel to that destination. Japan in particular went from 70% unsafe and only 8% safe in September up to 33% safe and 36% unsafe in the March survey. Even the US, which is always ranked as the most unsafe destination when we do these surveys, it dropped from 87% unsafe in September to just 69% unsafe in March. And the number of people rating the US as a safe destination has almost quadrupled from only 2% in September up to 7% now. So these safety ratings are somewhat, but not completely correlated with outbound destination preferences. Here on the list on the left, you can see the top 8 outbound destinations chosen in our March survey. Though do keep in mind that the survey respondents for the March survey, only 24% of them actually do have international travel experience. But we can compare this to the list on the right, which is taken from Dragon Trail's November and December China Travel Market Monitor surveys. And those surveys focus exclusively on Chinese who do have international travel experience. So when we look at both lists together, we can see that Japan, Thailand, Australia, and France top both of the lists. And South Korea is also included in the top 8 destinations for both overall travelers and outbound travelers. So that is all that we have time to share today, but the full report will be available on the Dragon Trail website right after the webinar, and that will be free to read and download. So please do check it out by going to the resources section of our website, or you will be able to find the direct link to the report by looking at our social media channels in the next hour or so on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also find all of our previous sentiment survey reports, as well as recordings of our past webinars, and lots of other free resources on Chinese travel and digital marketing by going to our website, www.dragontrail.com, or following us on our social media channels. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time and attention. And thank you very much, Nancy. And we're now ready to start the Q&A session.